beginning was the Word.
And the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
In the ancient kingdom of Israel, where prophets walked beside kings and the whispers of heaven guided the destiny of men, there lived a ruler whose story was both glorious and terribly human. His name was David. A shepherd boy who rose from obscurity, chosen by God himself, lifted from fields of dust to the throne of a nation. David, the warrior of unmatched courage, the poet whose psalms still echo through centuries, the king after God's own heart. But even the greatest of men cast shadows. David's life, once radiant with divine favor, would be stained by a moment of sin. A moment of weakness that would ripple far beyond his reign. A forbidden desire. A hidden crime. A secret sealed with blood. And though God forgave him, consequences, silent, patient, and inevitable, began to trace his footsteps like a gathering storm. From this storm, a child would rise. Absalom. Handsome beyond compare, fierce in loyalty, bold in spirit. A prince whose charm drew the hearts of the people like a magnet. But beneath the beauty burned a fire. The kind that glows quietly at first, soft, almost harmless, until the winds of pain and revenge feed it into something uncontrollable. For Absalom's life began in tragedy and grew in the shadow of his father's failures. Father and son, bound by blood, separated by wounds neither dared to speak aloud. This is their story. A story of love strained by betrayal. A story of ambition sharpened into rebellion. A story where the sins of a father echo through the destiny of his children. And at the heart of it all, a king begging God for mercy. And a son, rising slowly, step by step, toward the throne that was never meant to be his. The fall of Absalom did not begin the day he rebelled. It began long before. In the chambers of David's own heart. Brace yourself. For this is not merely history. This is a warning. Wrapped in the grief of a father and the ruin of a son. The tragedy of David and Absalom.
There are moments in history when kingdoms fall. Not by swords, not by armies, but by a single sin left unjudged. And so our story begins, not with war, not with prophecy, but with beauty, and the shadow waiting behind it. Absalom, third son of King David, Israel's pride, a prince whose very presence drew eyes and silenced rooms. Scripture says there was no blemish in him, not on his skin, not in his stride, no crack in the mask the world saw. And beside him, Tamar, as radiant as morning light upon Jerusalem's gates. Her royal robe of many colors shimmered like a covenant of peace, a robe given only to daughters who were pure, protected, promised. But where beauty rises, darkness watches. And in the depths of the king's palace, another son watched her too. Amnon, David's firstborn, the heir apparent, a prince whose desire turned to disease. His thoughts became chains, his appetite twisted into obsession. And obsession, fed by silence, becomes a predator of its own. Amnon wanted what was forbidden. He wanted what was sacred. He wanted his own sister. Pause, wind, low drums. And so a plan was whispered into his ears by a cunning friend. A deception crafted with the precision of a serpent. Amnon feigned sickness. He lay in his bed like a dying man, his face pale, his voice weak. And when King David, loving father, weary ruler, stood by his bedside, Amnon asked for only one thing: let my sister Tamar come and feed me with her own hands. A simple request, a harmless request, a request hiding a snare. David, unsuspecting, worn by the weight of governing tribes and wars, granted it. And Tamar, dutiful, innocent, obedient, walked into the chamber, never knowing she was stepping into a tomb of evil. The door closed behind her. She cooked, she served, she cared. But suddenly the mask dropped. Amnon seized her. The prince became a wolf. And his words, heavy with sickness, filled the room with dread. Lie with me. Her cry broke like a shofar in winter. No, my brother, do not force me. Such a thing is not done in Israel. But Amnon's lust was stronger than her plea. He overpowered her. A royal daughter fell. A sacred trust was shattered. A sin that would echo through generations was committed. And when it was done, when Tamar lay trembling, broken, Amnon's passion turned to poison. The love he claimed became hatred colder than stone. He commanded the servants, "Throw her out. Throw her out. Like refuse, like a stain, like a thing unworthy of the palace." Her royal robe was torn, her future dimmed. Tamar's cry became the nation's shame. And then, the news reached the king. David, the man after God's own heart. David, the warrior who slew giants. David, the shepherd who protected lambs, heard of his two sons, one defiled, one destroyed. And the scriptures say something terrifying. He was very angry, anger, but no justice, no punishment, no consequences. David, who once judged cases with wisdom from heaven, did nothing. Perhaps he saw Amnon and remembered his own sins with Bathsheba. Perhaps guilt tied his hands. Perhaps love for his firstborn pressed upon his heart like iron. Or perhaps this was the beginning of God's prophecy unfolding. The sword shall never depart from your house. But if David was silent, Absalom was not. He gathered his broken sister into his home, held her, comforted her, wept with her. But even as he soothed her trembling heart, a cold fire began to burn behind his eyes. He said to her, "Hold your peace, my sister." But Absalom himself held something far darker. For 2 years, 2 long years, the palace heard no word from him about Amnon. No accusation, no threat, no complaint. Absalom's silence became a storm cloud gathering over the king's house. Every feast, every gathering, every prayer, every night beneath the palace lamps, he watched Amnon laugh, eat, live, while Tamar sat in ashes. And in that silence, Absalom sharpened something sharper than any sword: vengeance. The prophecy of the prophet Nathan began to tremble, alive in the shadows. The house of David had been cracked, and through that crack, darkness was crawling in. This is the beginning, not of rebellion, not yet. This is the birth of a wound deep enough to tear a kingdom apart. For when justice sleeps, vengeance awakens, and Absalom had just begun to open his eyes.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word.
Two long, agonizing years in which the palace breathed, but something inside it was dying. Tamar, once clothed in royal colors, now lived like a shadow, her laughter gone, her glory faded, her future silent. Amnon, the violator, walked freely. He feasted. He smiled. He carried the arrogance of a man protected by power. And Absalom, Absalom, his silence was no longer the silence of grief. It was the silence of calculation, a soul sharpening itself like a blade in the dark. Every night he sat by Tamar's door. He watched her sleep broken, and something inside him hardened, not suddenly, but slowly, like cooling molten iron. The palace saw an Absalom who spoke softly, who smiled gently. But beneath the calm exterior, vengeance coiled like a serpent waiting for the perfect strike. And then, an opportunity appeared. Sound of wind, leaves rustling. Year after year, Absalom's servants tended his flocks in Balhazer, a quiet hill country, a place far from the eyes of kings, a place where accidents could happen and secrets could disappear into the earth. The shearing of sheep was approaching, a time of feasting, a time of celebration, and Absalom spoke, his voice warm, inviting innocent. Let my father the king and all his servants come to your servant's feast. But David declined. He feared it would burden Absalom. He didn't see the trap. He didn't sense the storm swirling at his doorstep. So Absalom pressed further. Oh, so casually. If not you, my father, then let my brother Amnon come. Amnon. The name slipped from his lips like a whisper wrapped in velvet. Not a hint of hatred. Not a flicker of rage. Just a gentle, brotherly request. David hesitated. Just for a moment. But again he yielded. Narrator low, building dread. And so it was set. An invitation. A journey. A feast. Absalom's servants prepared the tables with wine, bread, roasted lamb. Music filled the air. Laughter danced among the hills. No one knew they were eating on a battlefield disguised as a banquet. When Amnon arrived, carefree, relaxed, drunk with ease, Absalom's eyes watched him from across the table. Not with anger, not with grief, but with finality. He waited for Amnon's laughter to grow loud, waited for wine to loosen his limbs, waited for the moment when the heir of Israel would be most vulnerable. Then Absalom leaned toward his servants and spoke the words that would split a kingdom. When Amnon's heart is merry with wine, strike him. Do not fear. Have I not commanded you? The servants nodded. Their hands trembled. The air thickened. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. And when the moment came, a shout, a blade, a scream choking in the night air, Amnon fell, the firstborn of the king, the heir of Israel, struck down not by an enemy, but by justice twisted by silence. Panic erupted. The princes fled. Horses thundered into the night like frightened shadows.
I bring devastating news from the battle, my king. Your son is slain.
News raced to the palace like a storm without warning. All the king's sons are slain. David collapsed. He tore his garments. He wept with the agony only a father knows. Grief swallowed his breath like a wave threatening to drown him. But then, another messenger came, and the truth unfolded. Only Amnon was dead. Only one son slain. Only one crime avenged. Absalom had vanished. He fled to Geshur, to the home of his grandfather, to a land far from the reach of David, far from Jerusalem's priests, far from the Ark of Covenant, far from the eyes of the God whose laws he had twisted for his cause. There, in exile, Absalom waited for guilt to fade, waited for rumors to settle, waited for his father's heart to soften. David wept for Amnon, but soon, his tears shifted, the anger cooled, the wound reopened, and the scriptures say, the spirit of the king longed to go to Absalom, longed, craved, yearned. A father torn between justice and mercy, a king torn between the throne and his sons, a nation torn between right and wrong. And as David lay in his palace, and Absalom stared across the distance from Geshur, something unspoken lingered between them, a broken family, a wounded kingdom, prophecy alive and walking. The sword had tasted blood, and it was not yet satisfied.
Making the ancient scripts alive with modern themes. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
Absalom fled the kingdom, stained with the blood of his brother Amnon. Blood shed in vengeance, blood shed in silence, blood shed in the shadow of David's earlier inaction. But now rage had cooled. Now time had done its work. And scripture whispers a haunting truth. King David longed to go out to Absalom. He was still a king, but he was also a father. A father whose nights were haunted by memories of a son he had not touched, not spoken to, not forgiven. He missed him, but pride shackled him. Grief chained him. The throne was heavy, and so was his guilt. He entered Joab, the hardened general who had marched beside David for decades, saw what the king could not hide. The tremor in David's voice whenever Absalom's name was mentioned. The shadow that crossed his face at family gatherings. The silence in moments that once held joy. Joab knew, if this wound did not close, it would rot, and the kingdom would bleed from it. So Joab crafted a plan, subtle, strategic, brilliant. He summoned a wise woman from Tekoa, a place known for its storytellers and seers. He coached her, rehearsed her words, shaped her parable until it became a trap wrapped in compassion. The scriptures say, and Joab sent to Tekoa, and fetched thence a wise woman, and said unto her, I pray thee, feign thyself to be a mourner, and put on now mourning apparel, and anoint not thyself with oil, but be as a woman that had a long time mourned for the dead. Before David she stood, veiled in grief, spinning a tale of a family shattered by murder. A tale too close to David's own pain to ignore. She said, I am indeed a widow woman, and mine husband is dead. And thy handmaid had 2 sons, and they 2 strove together in the field, and there was none to part them. But the one smote the other and slew him. And, behold, the whole family is risen against thine handmaid. And they said, Deliver him that smote his brother, that we may kill him, for the life of his brother whom he slew, and we will destroy the heir also. And so they shall quench my coal which is left, and shall not leave to my husband neither name nor remainder upon the earth.
I am a widow, my lord, O king. Help me. My second son is about to be killed by family.
And the king said unto the woman, Go to thine house, and I will give charge concerning thee. The trap of Joab worked. And when the king's heart softened, when his judgment leaned toward mercy, Joab struck with the truth. You have condemned yourself, O king, for God devises ways so that the banished one does not remain forever banished. The words hit David like a blow. They exposed the wound. They exposed the longing. And the king finally spoke. Go, bring back the young man Absalom.
Go, bring back the young man Absalom.
But listen carefully. This was not reconciliation. Not yet. Absalom returned to Jerusalem. But the city was not home anymore. The palace walls that once echoed with his laughter became barriers of ice. Because David added a command heavy enough to crush a soul. Let him return to his house, but let him not see my face. 2 years passed. 2 years of silence. 2 years of punishment without words. 2 years of a son living only a few streets away from his father, yet exiled in his heart. Prince, but a prisoner of rejection. And slowly, the bitterness that once fueled Absalom's hatred toward Amnon twisted, turned toward David. The silence became unbearable. And when Joab ignored his pleas, when diplomacy failed, Absalom did what men do when all doors are shut. He set Joab's barley fields on fire. It was reckless. It was desperate. It was a cry from a son drowning in abandonment. Joab came running, angry, yes, but unable to deny the truth. Absalom needed an audience with the king. Joab must arrange for a meeting between the king and Absalom. Absalom said, not with remorse but as though issuing a threat. Behold, I sent unto thee, saying, Come hither, that I may send thee to the king, to say, Wherefore am I come from Geshur? It had been good for me to have been there still. Now therefore let me see the king's face, and if there be any iniquity in me, let him kill me. So at last, the moment arrived. The king allowed Absalom to see his face. A tense, fragile moment history would never forget. Absalom entered the throne room. He bowed low, face to the ground. The gesture of a subject, not a son. And David leaned forward and kissed him. But the kiss carried no warmth, no healing, no restoration. It was political. It was ceremonial. It was too late. For while David's heart longed for his son, Absalom's heart had already hardened into stone. Amnon, the heir apparent, had been cut down almost 5 years ago, And now Absalom wanted the throne of Israel while his father lived, even if at the cost of David's life. The word of God through Nathan, the prophet: "The sword shall not leave your home." Something was hidden behind the bow of Absalom, behind that kiss, behind that silence. It was the spark of rebellion, a spark that would soon set the entire kingdom ablaze.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Make
Absalom reigns. Absalom is king. Absalom reigns.
The rebellion erupted like a storm without warning. No whispers, no rumors, only a messenger. Dust on his feet, fear in his eyes, bursting into the palace with a single sentence that shattered the kingdom. "The hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom."
The hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom.
In that moment, the world seemed to freeze. David, the giant slayer, the king who conquered nations, the warrior whose name made enemies tremble, stood utterly still. But what he chose next shocked even his closest men. He did not call for his sword. He did not rally the mighty men. He did not prepare the ark or summon the priests for war. Instead, David chose surrender, not defeat, but a sacrifice, a decision made not for himself, but for Jerusalem. He knew that if he stayed, the city he loved, the city he had danced for, fought for, bled for, would drown in civil war. Streets would run with the blood of brothers. Families would be torn apart. Israel would devour itself. And so the king chose the loneliest path a ruler can ever choose. He chose exile, to spare the people he loved. The departure.
We must flee now. Let's leave the city right away.
It was a scene dripping with sorrow, an image carved into the memory of Israel forever. The king, Israel's shepherd, walked away from his own throne. Servants wept as they followed him. Soldiers lowered their heads. Women sobbed along the walls as their king passed by. David moved through the ancient streets of Jerusalem not as a conqueror, but as a broken father, a humbled man, a king laid low by both justice and mercy. He crossed the Kidron Valley, the brook murmuring beneath the weight of his grief. On the ascent to the Mount of Olives, the scripture gives us a picture so haunting, so raw, so painfully human. David walked barefoot, like a slave, his head covered, a sign of humiliation, and he wept, not silently, but openly, bitterly, unashamedly. A king, crying like a child, not for his kingdom, not for his crown, but for his son, his beautiful, broken, rebellious son. But then came a blow so deep, it pierced beyond the body, beyond the crown, beyond the kingdom, straight into the heart. A trembling voice reached David's ears. Ahithophel has joined Absalom. Ahithophel, his wisest counselor, his closest advisor, a man whose counsel carried the weight of divine wisdom, as if one inquired at the oracle of God. And now, that man had defected, not just to another leader, but to David's own son. Absalom had stolen not only the hearts of the people, but the mind of David's most trusted friend. David did not shout. He did not curse. He did not demand revenge. He prayed, with the trembling desperation of a man clinging to God as his last lifeline. "O Lord, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness." Just one sentence, not poetic, not majestic, just the raw cry of a broken heart.
O Lord, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness.
Darkness in Jerusalem. Meanwhile, in the city David had just abandoned, another king was entering. Absalom rode into Jerusalem as a conqueror. Trumpets blaring, crowds shouting, soldiers cheering.
Absalom is king, live long, O king. Absalom reigns.
But beneath the triumph lay a rot. the rod of pride, vengeance, and unholy ambition. Ahithophel stepped forward with counsel darker than night, a plan not only to strengthen Absalom's rebellion, but to sever the father-son bond so violently that reconciliation would become impossible. His advice, a public act of shame, a sin so outrageous the kingdom would know. There was no turning back. And so Absalom ascended to the rooftop of David's palace, the very roof where David had first seen Bathsheba, the place where desire had once birthed death. There, under the open sky, before the sun, before the city, before God, Absalom pitched a tent, and he committed an act so vile, so public, so prophetic, that angels must have turned their faces away. He slept with his father's concubines, not in secret, but openly, deliberately, defiantly, and in that moment, the prophecy of Nathan thundered into fulfillment. I will take your wives before your eyes, and give them to another, in the sight of this sun. The judgment David had feared was now unfolding across the rooftop of his own palace. What began with a kiss of false peace had now become a rebellion crowned in shame. David walked the hills as a weeping exile. Absalom sat in the palace as a triumphant rebel. And Israel stood trembling between a broken father and a prodigal son. The kingdom had entered a night of sorrow. But God was not finished. Not with David. Not with Absalom. Not with Israel. The weeping king would rise again, but only after walking through a valley of shadows. Few men ever survived.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
The fall of Absalom. Jerusalem has seen storms, but none so dark as the day the heart of its king broke in silence. It began with footsteps, dust-covered messengers running through the streets, urgency burning in their throats. When they reached the palace, their words came out in gasps, trembling against the stone walls. Absalom, your son, has stolen the hearts of Israel. The message struck like thunder, not from foreign nations, not from Philistine giants, not from Amalekite raiders, but from the son David loved. And in that moment, the man who once stood fearless before Goliath did not reach for a sword. He reached for humility, for survival, for the remnants of a kingdom at risk of bleeding from within. David fled, not in royal robes or mounted on a war horse, but as a man stripped of everything but breath and guilt, barefoot, head covered, eyes wet. As he ascended the Mount of Olives, his tears traced the same path where his prayers had once danced before God. Now the mountain bore witness to despair. Those who followed him wept, those who watched him feared, and those who despised him rejoiced. The king had left his city. Jerusalem's walls shuddered beneath the weight of prophecy fulfilled. The sword shall never depart from your house. David may have escaped the wrath of his enemies, but he could not outrun the shadow of his past. Behind him, Absalom entered Jerusalem with the swagger of a man who believed destiny bowed at his feet. He rode a royal chariot, golden wheels grinding against the stones of the city his father built. And when he stepped into the palace, the silence was heavy, the kind of silence that comes when innocence is buried. To seal his rebellion, Absalom ascended to the rooftop of the palace, the very rooftop where David once faltered, and performed an act that shook heaven. In the sight of all Israel, under open sky, he took his father's concubines. This was not lust. It was declaration, a line carved between father and son, a wound torn into the heart of a nation. The sun witnessed it, Jerusalem whispered it, and heaven recorded it. There would be no peace. There would be no return. The sword had chosen its path. Beside Absalom stood Ahithophel, David's old friend, once his confidant, now a blade aimed at his heart. Ahithophel's counsel was sharp, cold, and terrifyingly precise. "Pursue David tonight," he said. "Strike him while he is weary. Cut off the head, and the body will collapse." The advice was deadly and true.
Pursue David tonight. Strike him while he is weary. End this war before it begins.
But God had slipped another piece onto the board. Hushai the Archite, David's hidden ally, approached Absalom with seeming loyalty and offered another counsel.
Do not rush. Gather all Israel. Let Absalom lead the army himself.
Gentle, slow, and deceptively wise. Wait, gather all Israel. Let Absalom lead the army himself. Let the land tremble at the sight of your strength. Two voices echoed in the prince's mind. One clear as steel, the other warm as flattery. One heaven had blessed with wisdom, the other heaven had sent to destroy. Absalom, drunk on pride, chose the poisoned counsel. And when Ahithophel realized his wisdom had been rejected, he returned to his home, set his affairs in order, and hanged himself. His death fell over Jerusalem like a cold wind, a reminder that rebellion devours not only its enemies, but its architects. Meanwhile, across the Jordan, in the quiet refuge of Mahanaim, David gathered his remaining strength.
Men of Israel, the Lord our God goes before us. Be strong and courageous, for he will not fail you.
The warriors who once followed him through caves, deserts, and years of exile appeared once more older, scarred, but fiercely loyal. Joab stood cold and calculating. Abishai hovered, blade ready. And Ittai the Gittite, a foreigner, pledged loyalty stronger than many Israelites. David, weary yet unbroken, attempted to walk among them into battle, but they stopped him. "No, my king. You are worth 10,000 of us." His people would fight. He would wait. And as they prepared to march into the jaws of war, David whispered a plea that carried the weight of a father's shattered heart. "Deal gently, for my sake, with the young man Absalom." But the wind swallowed his words, and the earth carried them away. Then came the battle, not in a city, nor in open fields, but in the forest of Ephraim, a forest ancient, twisted, breathing like a living creature. Its branches stretched like arms, its roots tangled like traps. Israel's armies clashed within its shadows, swords ringing, shields breaking, cries echoing through the leaves. But something strange happened that day. The forest fought. It devoured men with pits and thorns. It swallowed soldiers in hidden ravines. It tore through Absalom's forces with more ferocity than David's warriors. It was as though creation itself rose to judge the rebellion. Trees bent, branches cracked, and one branch, one ordained by heaven, waited for the rebel prince. Absalom rode swiftly beneath the thick boughs of an oak, his long, radiant hair flowing behind him like a banner of pride. Then, a sudden clutch, a violent halt. His hair became entangled in the branches. His body jerked upward. The mule beneath him darted forward. And the prince hung suspended, between heaven and earth, between rebellion and redemption, between the kingdom he sought and the father he betrayed. No soldier stood beside him. No chariot came to rescue him. The forest held him in judgment, as though nature itself remembered Nathan's prophecy. When Joab heard the news, he did not hesitate. He did not tremble. He did not soften. He took 3 javelins, weapons meant for execution, not mercy, and marched into the forest with the fury of a man who had seen too much chaos. David's plea meant nothing to him. Israel's future meant everything. He found Absalom hanging by his own pride, defenseless, silent, eyes desperate. And Joab drove the javelins into his heart. Absalom's body convulsed. The branches shivered. The forest exhaled. Joab's armor-bearers finished the deed, and the rebellion died on a tree. A prince destroyed by the very image he worshipped. His beauty, his hair, his pride. News of the battle rippled across the land. Ahimaaz, eager and swift, begged to run with the message. But Joab chose the Cushite. Still, Ahimaaz ran. He ran like the wind. He outran the Cushite, but he carried no truth. When he reached David, panting and dust-covered, David asked the question no king should ever have to ask. Is the young man Absalom safe? Ahimaaz faltered.
Is the young man Absalom safe? Is the young man Absalom safe? Is the young man
I saw
alive?
a great tumult, but I did not know what it was. Then the Cushite arrived, steady, respectful, unwavering. May all who rise against my lord the king be as that young man is. The word struck David like an iron blow. He
Oh, my son!
staggered. He trembled. Then he climbed the stairs to the upper chamber above the gate. And the whole city heard the cry that tore through heaven. Oh, my son Absalom! My son Absalom! Would God I had died for thee! Oh, Absalom, my son, my son!
If only I had died
It was the
instead of
cry
you,
of a king, yes. But more than that, it was the cry of a father who watched his own sins come home to judge him. The cry echoed through Jerusalem's streets, through the mountains, and through time itself. David returned to Jerusalem not as a conquering king, but as a wounded one. His throne was restored, but his family was ashes. His crown shone, but his heart was dust. The sword had not departed from his house. It had carved its judgment into the life of every child he loved. And though David ruled for many years after, though his psalms rose to heaven, though his name remained beloved, there was a hollow place in his soul, where Absalom's name echoed forever. Absalom had built for himself a monument in the King's Valley, a pillar he called by his own name, because he had no sons to bear it. It stands as testimony, a finger of stone raised by pride, pointing to the sky as though demanding heaven remember him. But heaven remembers differently. Absalom is not remembered for beauty, nor for charm, nor for ambition. He is remembered as a warning, a prince torn between love and arrogance, between destiny and rebellion, between the father he scorned and the God he ignored. His life is a shadow, his death a judgment, his legacy a tragic echo of a prophecy spoken long before he drew his first breath. The sword shall never depart from your house. Thus ends the story of Absalom, the rebel prince who rose too high, ran too far, and fell too deep. A story of pride and consequence, of sin and sorrow, of a father's broken heart, and a son's fatal ambition. A story written in tears, sealed in blood, and whispered across the ages, as a reminder that rebellion has a price, and some swords once drawn
Have mercy on
never
me, O
return
Lord,
to their
according
sheath.
to thy loving kindness.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.